Hello everybody. So thank you Raj for inviting me today, and obviously those of you that are going to be watching this on video later, there's going to be an exercise that we're going to be doing. Might even do it twice, you never know, and you will be able to do this at home for yourself. And the take-home message, I hope, from what I'm going to be talking about today, which is IEMT, Integral Eye Movement Therapy, or techniques. I prefer the word techniques because then it sort of it opens this modality out, because IEMT is one of these modalities that can be used as a sort of quick fix for ourselves, so we can do self-use, but in professional hands, therapist hands, it can also be a more of a technique for things like trauma and anxiety issues, depression, etc. But obviously we need to have a background in that. But IEMT itself, it's so simple to grasp, and the techniques have been structured so well, and the wording is so precise and so specific that for most people, most of the time, change and real tangible change can be accrued with this technique. So I've got a little presentation, so I'll be dipping in and out of slides. I might pop up over the slides as well every now and then. One of the other things that Raj has kindly done a little biog for me is I also am a writer and a singer, so sang with a former couple of big bands in the UK, and I've just written the very first IEMT book. So that'll be coming out. We're looking at a date of the 1st of September, fingers crossed. And I know, Raj, you're also a writer yourself as well, and you give me a few tips, weren't you, on things like publishing and things, which is great. So let's get cracking then. So you've already heard a little bit about me, so don't need to labour this slide at all. So let's get into looking at the brain, really. So what we are really concerning ourselves with IEMT is how the brain connects to eye movements. That's part of it. And we know that most of what goes on in our lives is obviously massively directed from the brain. The brain-body connection is incredibly important. So having an understanding of physiology and how the neural pathways work is instrumental to how IEMT works. But we don't need to know loads and loads of in-depth information. I am a former university lecturer and trainer, so I'm a bit of a geek. You know, I used to work in neurosurgery. I've worked with brain work and pathology, so I do get a little bit geeky around the old brain. So if I go on a bit too much, just tell me to shut up and we'll get on with the actual stuff that we want to do. If you put me back on the screen, if that's okay, Mike, so you can take that slide off, that would be brilliant. Yeah, so let's have a little look at the brain then. So what we do know about the brain, of course, is a left side and a right side. And the left generally is thought to be more concerned with our logic and our reasoning and our higher functioning, our speech, our language. So that tends to be more of the left side of the brain. The right side of the brain tends to be more of the artistic side, the emotional side. That's usually where our swearing happens as well. It's usually right-sided because it's quite emotionally driven. So let's have a look at this picture again. So as I say, left brain, analytical, thought-driven, maths and science, logic, right side motor skills. And this is the interesting thing, isn't it, about the brain? Because it is contralateral control. So basically our left brain controls what happens on the right side of the body, and the right side of the brain controls what happens on the left. What we also do know, of course, is this is not set in stone. So this is a generalisation of what the brain does. And right in the middle of the brain, dividing the two halves, is something called the corpus callosum, which is a thick band of connective tissue. But that's incredibly important because at this point, we have that crossover from left to right. So, you know, the brain, say the right hemisphere of the brain, it's more creative. Things like facial recognition happen in the right side of the brain. So again, for the way that we are social animals and social creatures, and we might actually get a little look at that in a little bit more depth later, facial recognition and the eyes are paramount to our setting up of our connections with each other. And so, not surprisingly then, IEMT uses bilateral eye movements because of that interconnection of the brain and also the way we look at memory, visuals, our senses, that actually comes into all parts of the brain, both sides, left and right. So when we're doing the work that we do, which includes eye movements, not just eye movements, there's a lot more to IEMT than this, but the eye movement work, what we need to be making sure of is that in order to be processing memory, consolidating memory, updating identity, we need to be doing left and right eye movements. And you're going to be doing a little bit of that tonight, so you're going to have a go yourselves. So let's have a little look at memory then. Now, for many, many years, you know, we kind of thought that memory was a bit like a video recorder. We know that memories are what shape our experience of the world. Also, memories are instrumental in us being able to predict certain things. So the brain will fill in various gaps. I'm sure you've all had a go at these things pop up on Facebook and the like, don't they, where somebody will do a sentence or a couple of sentences and some of the letters will be the wrong way round, some of the words will be spelt slightly differently, but the brain is so clever that it can fill in all the gaps and actually we can read those words normally as if we're just reading a passage. So the brain, the fiction was for many years that it was a bit like a video recorder for memory, and therefore it records all of these memories and then it kind of stores them in this video format for life. Of course, that's not true. So what scientists have found decades ago really is it's not a video recorder. And here's the thing, memory is distributed throughout your brain. It's tiny little bits and pieces, bits of chemical, bits of electricity that's distributed in all these different bits. And every time that we think of something from the past, we're thinking of a memory, we have to, and this is how amazing our brain is, it has to take all of those bits of that memory and all of these different parts of the brain and reconstitute it back to a recognisable memory. So again, that's one of the reasons why when we're doing eye movement work, we need to do left and right eye movements because bits of this memory are going to be stored in different places all over the brain. So what else do we know about memory? Well, the fiction is that forgetting is sort of like a passive process. It's, you know, it's just something that happens almost like magic and we just forget things, and some memories are not very emotionally driven, so we tend to forget them quite quickly. Some emotions are very emotionally driven and we tend to have a stronger memory. And the thought was that, you know, these memories that we forget tend to sort of fade over time, like, I don't know, putting a photograph in the sunlight and it fades over time. That was the fiction. That's what we thought the brain did. However, very recent work has shown that this happens. The loss of memory is not passive. It's actually an active process of the brain. So when we're doing the work that we're doing with IEMT, what we need to understand is we're sort of like hurrying up the process of the forgetting, if you like, the processing, the consolidation and the storage of memories that may be troublesome or bothersome. So that's why the work that we do therapeutically, we can work with things like PTSD, where people are having very troublesome memories that haven't been consolidated they haven't been processed. They are still in that active part of memory and giving people lots and lots of issues because of the knock-on emotional effects, the knock-on behavioural effects that can happen from the pain of having to remember these awful memories. So actually with IEMT, we're speeding up the process of that forgetting. Now, it doesn't mean that you will forget the whole memory all of the time, but often the effects can be so profound that people can't even... And one of the phrases that people often say to me is, I can't grab it back. I can't grab hold of that memory anymore when we do the work, which is brilliant. Because if that's been a big intrusive memory in someone's life and it's been having all of this knock-on effect for their emotions and for their behaviour, not to be able to grab hold of that memory anymore is a significant change for people. And that's what we're hoping to achieve. So just a little bit about memory in a little bit more depth now. So with the brain, we have something called implicit and explicit memory. We have short-term memory and long-term memory. So for us, for IEMT, what we're actually looking to be working on is this explicit branch of memory. And again, that can be split up into further branches of memory, something called declarative, can't say that word, episodic and semantic. And we tend to be working more with the episodic memory, which is the memory that the hippocampus actually short-term creates for us. Now, for some people, unfortunately, we have problems with that hippocampal memory because the memory is formed and it's meant to be short-term, and eventually, as I say, it'll get broken up into little pieces like a jigsaw puzzle. It starts off as a fully formed jigsaw puzzle, and then the brain breaks it into its constituent parts and puts it into the parts of the brain that it needs to be. And as I say, very quickly, if you want to recall a memory that has an emotional impact on us, we can often very quickly, literally in the blink of an eye, recall a memory. And that's how brilliant our brain is, by the way. It can recall things really, really quickly. Now, for years and years and years, people have gone for therapy and psychotherapy and seen psychiatrists, and have gone through years and years and years of therapy to deal with these sort of problems. But of course, what was found some years ago with other eye movement techniques that sort of came out of the NLP world. So you had Francine Shapiro with EMDR, you had Connirae and Andreas with EMI, and then Andrew Austin sort of got to work with Connirae and Andreas and just deviated away from what they were doing. But what we saw is that the brain is that brilliant that if it can actually draw those memories back in a nanosecond, why can't the brain get rid of troublesome memories quickly? It should be able to, shouldn't it, when you think about it? If it's that brilliant, it shouldn't have to take years and years and years of in-depth psychology and psychiatry to deal with some of these emotions. So that's what these type of techniques have been honed to do. Now with IEMT, we take it one step further as well, because we're not just looking at troublesome memories that cause troublesome feelings. We're actually looking at the person as a whole. We're looking at their physiology and how that impacts on their state and on their mood, and also who that person is being. So quite unique to IEMT, we have a whole branch that we work on, which is identity based. And really, this is one of the key aspects of the work we do, because the who we are actually feeds into the how we're being. And so if we're trying to just deal with feelings and kinesthetics, but we're not actually addressing the issue of that who that person is, that person that may say, I've got low self-esteem, I don't like myself, I hate myself, you know, these kind of statements that are the very core of identity work. If we're not working with identity, then sooner or later, of course, they're going to start creating those issues again. They're going to start cycling round. They're going to start getting into schemas and repeating certain issues in their lives. And beneath all of that, so the bedrock, if you like, of IEMT, we are based on something called the 5 primary patterns of chronicity. And these are, again, unconscious cycling patterns that people run that they just don't know that they're running. And if somebody doesn't know that they're running a certain pattern, then how are they ever going to know how to change that pattern? So as I say, you know, we can work on the emotion or the feeling of something. Somebody comes in and says, you know, I feel sad, or I've got anxiety, or, you know, I'm feeling angry, I'm getting angry all of the time. That's all well and good, working on that. But really, what we tend to see is that this is a cause. Sorry, this is an effect. So the anger is an effect. The anxiety is an effect. Depression is an effect. What we need to be looking at, and that might need looking and working on the patterns of chronicity, but also at an identity level, is cause. But again, the great thing about what we do is we don't need to do an archaeological dig. We don't need to give loads and loads of information. A person doesn't have to come in and tell us their life story at all in order to absolutely facilitate change. And I think that's why people love this method, this technique. I often get to see the people that have been to lots and lots of different therapies, and they may have had some, you know, little changes here and there, but things have slipped back or the feelings haven't gone. And often they get caught up in having to sit and recount that story again. A lot of people just get fed up of having to recount that story again. You know, how many times am I going to have to tell another person what happened in the past? And we don't have to with IEMT. So the work can be done with very little content as well. So again, that's one of the beauties of this. So any of you that work with, for example, teenagers, you know, they don't really want to tell you their stuff, do they? Let's face it. This is a great modality for teenagers and young people that just don't want to go into their stuff, which is, you know, again, fantastic for them. So getting back to memory then. So as I say, we're looking more at episodic memory. And this is an interesting fact, isn't it? So the human brain can process 11 million bits of information every second. Wow, that's just amazing. But of course, our conscious minds can only handle 40 to 50 bits of information in a second. So what happens is the brain then makes these little shortcuts. It can lead to things like implicit bias. You know, we all have our own bias. We all have our filters. We all have our beliefs. We all have our values and ethics and all of these things. And a lot of this stuff feeds into our prediction. And our prediction then feeds into how we are feeling and how we are then behaving. Just a little bit more stuff here about those different types of memory. What we are looking at mainly working within the brain are a couple of areas of the brain, which is the amygdala part of the brain and the hippocampus part of the brain. And as you can see here, they are actually in different parts of memory structure. So the amygdala is this implicit or procedural memory. Now this comes online from birth. Some people even say it may come online before birth, you know, because what we do know is that babies have birth memory. So I teach hypnobirthing, been teaching it for many, many years. And what I have found is when parents are listening to the relaxations and various pieces of music, babies have memory of that. So parents can actually play those tracks and those pieces of music to the babies once they're born, and the babies respond. So if the babies get a bit fractious, they put one of the tracks on, or they put the memory on, they put the music on, because the baby has got a memory of that. So coming back to this little slide, The other really important part that we want to be looking at and working on is the hippocampus. Well, that's in explicit or declarative memory, which is a different part of memory. Now, this doesn't really come online till a child is about 18 months to 2 years old. They suddenly start getting a sense of self. So this part of the brain is where that sense of self, that sense of identity starts to become more apparent. So we need to find a way of getting to access both of those parts of the brain, because when somebody has a memory which is unpleasant, that is with some unpleasant feelings, we have to be working on the amygdala and the hippocampus at the same time. So, as I say, implicit memory can be pre-birth and is connected to something called fight, flight, freeze, which you may well have heard of. The amygdala remembers emotional stuff, so emotional memory. This occurs in the amygdala. Explicit language-based comes on later. So this is just that hippocampal part of the brain. So that comes later. So again, really interesting, some research that is doing the rounds at the moment based on something called chronicity. So what we do know now is, as human beings, we may be quite unique in the fact that as a human being, we can exist in the now, because we all exist in the now. But the way our brains are configured and structured is people can favour going back in time and wanting to be in the past and be with their memories a lot. So I often see this with people that have depression, PTSD. They tend to sort of go back in time. They want to be who they were before, and this can exacerbate their feelings of depression. Or we have the other people that are more future-based. They're more focusing on what might happen. And in IEMT, we have a pattern of chronicity called the great big what if pattern of chronicity. So these people are often thinking about stuff that might happen. Of course, it may never happen. So if they're future focused and future based, again, they're not actually focusing on the here and now. So a lot of people some people are jumping around, all three. Most of us, we don't have too much stuff going on. We can have some memories from the past, and that's great, but we're not going to stay in the past or want to stay in the past. And most of us, we want to plan for tomorrow. We've got a holiday coming up and we want to make sure that things are planned so we can future think, but we're not getting stuck in that anxiety-driven, future-paced world. So the anxiety people, this is an overuse of the imagination. So we're imagining all sorts of possibilities and outcomes that aren't usually the best possibilities and outcomes if somebody has an anxiety disorder. So we know the human brain has this capacity. So what we're hoping to help people with is to balance this a lot more. So they're not living in the past, living in the future. They're actually more present with their life, but can dip in and out as and when they need to, because they're great skills to have, aren't they? To be able to plan for the future and think of some lovely memories that we've had of the past. So they're nice skills to have. Okay, so a little bit about the brain then. So limbic system, this is the behavioural, emotional part of the brain. If we sort of slice the brain in half, this would sit sort of at the centre point of the brain. And we know that the cerebellum is an interesting part of the brain as well, because this is where our motor controls come from. So we have coordination, we have timing, so timing of movements. This is the sort of cerebellum part of the brain. But again, mainly for IEMT, we are looking more at this central core, this limbic system. And as I say, one of the most important parts is our amygdala. And our amygdala, I don't know if you can see that, if I get closer. That's an almond. So our amygdalas, and we have two of them. We have two amygdalas, and they are roughly the size and shape of almonds. So these tiny little parts of the brain are responsible for many of the emotions that we feel. They're often wired more towards the negative, if you want to call it. I don't really like to call emotions negative, because that's sort of disingenuous. An emotion is an emotion, but how we then behave on that emotion can be negative. The other thing about those little bits of brain is they are dimorphic. So between men and women, they are slightly different, and they can change size. So if a person has something like PTSD, for example, or if they're constantly running anxiety, that part of the brain may get bigger over time and can sort of start to over-respond and overreact. So this should sort of come online. We get a little fright, it comes online, it tells our body to do something, fight, flight, freeze, to deal with the issue, and then it should sort of shut back down again or quieten back down again. But in some people, this kind of gets stuck. Now, conversely, the hippocampus, so that part of the brain that is dealing with the memory, that can actually shrink over time. So we've seen in studies with people with PTSD, the hippocampus can actually shrink. So these are two parts of the brain that have what we call neuroplasticity. They're not set in stone, they can change. But the great thing is what we've also seen is by dealing with issues people might have, then these can start to come back into balance. So even a part of the brain like the hippocampus that might shrink, once issues are dealt with, it can start to grow again. And that's brilliant, because we need that for our short-term memory and all the great memories that we're going to have. So what time have we? Just looking at the clock here, guys. So we're doing okay. So yeah. So our amygdala, hypothalamus, hippocampus, this is all limbic system. And the hippocampus, what it does is it puts our memories into context. So it kind of date stamps them. So it gives them a date stamp. So we have a time, we have a date, and we have a finish mark as well, or we should do. So when we finish with that memory, what the brain then should do is start to, as I say, break it up so it can get filed into the other parts of the brain for long-term storage. So it's the kind of thing that we shouldn't be able to kind of recall all of the time, 24/7. So memory and emotion then, as I say, the amygdala and the hippocampus are linked. They're two independent systems, but they are linked. And the amygdala especially modulates this encoding and storage and of these memories that are dependent on the hippocampus. So this is how we form this episodic memory. So have a little think about what you did this morning when you got up. So have a little think of them, go back in your memory. We're not going back too far in time, but I'm sure because it was Father's Day, it might have been quite an exciting day. So you can remember what you did when you get up, what you did next, what you did at lunchtime, perhaps what you did just before coming online to this meeting. So you have memory. It's not one big long lasting memory. It's kind of little bits of memory that are date and time stamped. Now, can you think about what you did yesterday evening? So have a little think back to what you did yesterday evening. Might be a little bit fuzzier for some people. Might be really, really, still very, very strong. Have a think about a week ago today. Can you remember what you were doing a week ago today? Things start to get a little bit more difficult, don't they, the further back in time we go, unless there was something significant. So, for example, if it was your birthday a week ago, I'm sure that you can remember exactly what you were doing a week ago because you might have had a party, you might have had a friend round, etc., etc. So there was something significant that happened. The likelihood is you've got a good memory of that still. And it'll be date stamped and time stamped. But as I say, a function of the brain is forgetting. We should be able to forget stuff that, is not hugely important. Otherwise, there's going to be no capacity in our conscious brain for all of this stuff. We just saw, the unconscious mind can deal with 11 million bits of information in a second. So we don't want to be consciously aware of 11 million bits of information. And also we haven't got the capacity in the conscious mind because it can only deal with 40 to 50 in a second. That does not have the capacity to store all of this information. So it's important that it gets forgotten, if you like, for want of a better word, really. So let's just pop this on for you because fight, flight, freeze. Has anybody not heard of fight, flight, freeze? Just, if anyone wants to put the camera on and have a little, put their hand up or anything like that. Hopefully you've all heard of this. Now, again, this is something that we are thinking about and looking at with certain issues that people come to us with, because as I say, their physiology, how the physiology is responding is equally as important as what's going on in the mind. And we have these branches of the autonomic nervous system called the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And if someone is in fight, flight or freeze, they're going to be locked into this sympathetic branch of this autonomic nervous system. So they're going to be primed for movement, for running away, for fighting. But also sometimes what can happen with some people is that a freeze mode happens as well. So again, this freeze mode is something that's been researched in quite a lot of depth. Some of you may have heard of Stephen Porges and the polyvagal theory. And he's done a lot of work on actually looking and researching into freeze mode, because what we know is that people with traumatic issues often go into freeze mode. That's their default mode because that is their survival mode for these people. So people with quite big traumas or long-term traumas, that freeze mode is their survival mode rather than running away or standing and fighting. So that can be ultimately important. And often people that have been traumatized, for example, trauma, one of the sort of definitions of trauma is that it is a feeling of powerlessness. And people that feel powerless can often go into this very locked in, frozen way of being. So with the work that we do, we're hoping to deal with that and, and unlock that for people. So this is a bit more of the polyvagal theory. We've got a green light. So when everything's green in our brain, everything's good. We're in that parasympathetic part of the brain. Our heart rate is at a nice level, our blood pressure's at a good level, our digestion is working, our blood's pumping the way it should do, everything is working as it should be. Now, if we have a feeling that is unwanted, a feeling of fear, for example, a feeling of anxiety, a lot of people with anxiety are often in this orange zone, and they often live in this orange zone, loads and loads of their life. And that can be very exhausting for people. And as I say, then there are some people that end up in this trauma-free state as well. No conscious control. The heart rate actually, rather than speeding up like it does in fight and flight, it slows down. We get immobilization. We get this sort of disconnection as well. So people can feel kind of disconnected from themselves. It's very low energy. They can feel very exhausted, very sleepy. It's almost like a feigning of death, actually, is what this is, because we see this in the wild. So animals in the wild do this far more than human beings do. And they will do that freeze mode when there's a predator around so that they can sort of escape. So this is sometimes what happens with the brain. So I think it'd be good at this point for us to do a little bit of an exercise. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to be going to go in breakout rooms today, but I am going to need your cameras on, guys, because we're going to have to do this as a group exercise if you want to do it. So if you've got a bothersome memory that you would like to deal with, now's your opportunity. And it's only going to take about 30 seconds. You don't need to tell me or anybody anything, but I do need your cameras on, otherwise we're not going to be able to do this exercise. And if not, it'll be just me and Raj. So, fantastic. I say, normally we do this in breakout rooms, but we haven't got that facility today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the exercise up for you to have a little look at as well. So let me just find that first. So I'm just going to talk you through the exercise. So this is really, really simple. So when I see clients, or when I'm doing an IEMT training, this is the first eye movement exercise that we do with people. Because as a convincer goes, it's usually very, very successful. Now, with IEMT, what we say is it works for most of the people most of the time. And there's always going to be someone, isn't there, that this is not going to be the right modality for them. But for most of the people, most of the time, this works really well. So all you need for this particular exercise is some memory of something that is bothersome, troublesome, nothing huge though. So we're not going to be working on your worst thing that you've ever had in your life in this little exercise. If you were to score this would be a maximum of 6 out of 10. So we're looking for something that's, say, between 4 and 6 out of 10. Now, for example, it could be something from years and years ago that when you think about it now still gives you a little bit of not the best feeling in the world. Or it could be something from days ago or yesterday or from today. The boss might have really pissed you off this week in work or something. And you know what it's like, we sort of bring it home with us and we still have the feeling. So it can be anything, but as long as you have a vivid memory of that. So because we're working on memory, not just feeling and emotion, it wants to be something that when you think about it now, you can close your eyes for a second if you want to, think about that memory. It wants to be strong and vivid. And for example, when I was 8 years of age, there's one of my strong memories. I was in a big department store in Edinburgh. We were on holiday there, and I was 8 years of age. Thought I was a mature 8-year-old. Asked my mum if I could go to the toilets on my own. So she said, yeah, okay, I'll let you go to the toilets on your own. So I did. Now, back in the day, I'm still only very little, but I was even littler then. And went to the loo, closed the door, finished on the loo. It was a big, heavy wooden door, and I can remember, and I can still see the colour of the door. I can still feel the metal of the lock that I locked. And then when I went to let myself out of the toilet, guess what? I was locked in. And I was locked in for it felt like it was hours of me banging and screaming to get somebody's attention in this loo. It was probably, 5-10 minutes before somebody came. But my God, that felt like a huge trauma. Now, of course, when I look back at it now, I've still got a strong memory of that, and I've still got a bit of a feeling of what it was, but it's not a huge feeling. Back in the day, when I was 8 years old, it would have felt terrible. Everyone's going to go and I'm going to get locked in the toilet in this, place overnight. So if you've got something like that, that would be brilliant. But as I say, it could be something from a week ago, a day ago. So have you all got something? Yeah, fantastic. So I've never done this as a group like this because we normally do it one-to-one. But let's give it a go. Let's give it a go. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be moving your eyes around in a minute. Now my fingers will go off the screen. And with this exercise, it's really important that you keep your head still, and it's your eyes that are going to be moving, okay? You want to move your eyes as far to the peripheries as you can. So in the room that you're in now, if you've got sort of 2 points towards the ceiling in the corners, 2 points sort of either side of your ears, as far as you can see, and 2 points down towards the floor that you can see, just so you can gauge places to be looking. That's really cool. So feeling that's about 5 or 6 out of 10, vivid memory, and all I'm going to ask you to do, as I say, is to move your eyes, but keep thinking of the memory. So keep the memory as vividly as you can in your mind. Is that okay? So I'm going to sort of line myself up here with the screen. So if you want to watch the pen, as I say, this is going to go off the screen. Bring that memory up as strongly as you can. And I'm going to go to everyone's left and then to the right. To the left and to the right. Keep thinking of this memory. Head nice and still. Really keep thinking of this memory. And if it fades, try and bring it back. Okay, so now what we're going to do is going to go up to your left, and then I'm going to go down on a diagonal. So all the way up, all the way down, all the way up, all the way down. Keep going, head nice and still, all the way up, all the way down, all the way up, all the way down, all the way up. We're going to scoot along the top, over to your right and down to the floor on the diagonal. All the way up, all the way down, all the way up, head nice and still. That's it, fantastic. Keep thinking of this memory if you can. All the way up, all the way down, back to the middle. One more scoot across the middle, and we're going to stop. Okay. So take a breath. That's good. A couple of breaths in is good. Take a drink if you want to take a drink. I'm going to take a drink. So it's going to be feedback time. So if anyone wants to put their mic on. So just got a couple of questions to ask you, really, as far as this is concerned. Now, the great thing was you didn't have to tell me what you were thinking of, so that was brilliant. So you kept that all to yourself. What I want to ask you now, and as I say, do jump in and shout, is when you think about that memory now, so that memory that you were thinking of, when you think of it now, what do you notice about the memory?
I think maybe it's not as strong.
It's not as strong. Okay, fantastic. So
I said it feels like it's like it's gone black and white, and it's gone like in the distance.
Fantastic.
You know what I mean?
Oh, that's you're going to be great at this, aren't you? That's brilliant. Okay, gone black and white, gone into the distance. Fantastic. Anybody else notice anything about that? The actual quality of the memory?
For me, it feels like it's blurred around the edges.
Blurred around the edges.
A bit more.
Brilliant. Yeah, fantastic. So think about the feeling now, which was, say, a maximum of 6 out of 10. What do you notice when you think about the feeling now? Whatever it was, the feeling was.
Not as intense.
Not as intense. And would anyone score it less than a 6 out of 10 now, or a 5 out of 10? Yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Lots of nodding heads. That's
Not
brilliant.
so intense, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool. Oh, there you go. We've just done this for the first time through the screen with an audience, which is absolutely fantastic. So,
Sonia, so what is this actually doing?
So, yeah.
Are we going to that? Are you?
Yeah, so I'm going to go into what we're doing now. So what we have just started in motion is to get a memory that is bothersome, because we've learned to feel this way about this thing. So IEMT predicates on certain questions, and one of the questions is, how did this person learn to feel this way about this thing? And there was some event that happened that triggered a particular emotion, and that kind of gets stuck together. So you've got the bit of the memory, the hippocampus bit, you've got the amygdala bit, and it kind of fuses into like a big ball of memory, if you like. And what we've just started to do is to, at last, start to cleave the association for that. So it's much more difficult. It's a bit like, you know, pouring oil on it or something, because it's going to be much more difficult for it to stick together now, those two parts of that experience. And so with the left, right, because we need to use both hemispheres of the brain, because this is where memory and emotion are, we've started to break up the jigsaw puzzle, if you like. And so what's happening is it's now going to find its way to a better place for us. You know, we no longer have to, when we think about this certain memory, have to be crippled by the emotion of that memory or even the visuals of that memory. So very, very rapidly, very quickly, you've started to create change in your brain. And that's what I was saying before. You know, why should it take years and years of psychotherapy in order to change something that's bothersome to us? Shouldn't have to, because the brain is that brilliant. If it can, you know, create thoughts in a nanosecond, why can't it uncreate them in a nanosecond? Which it can. You've just all experienced that. So I'm going to ask you to do something for me now. I'm going to ask you to sort of relax your hands down on your laps if you can. Okay. Take a nice breath in and out. Okay. And what I want you to do, eyes open or closed, it's entirely up to you. But I want you to really try to get that memory, that experience back exactly as it was before. So if you want to close your eyes and try and get it back, that's fine. And really try to, molecule by molecule, get it back exactly as it was, visually and the feeling. And if you want to pop your hand up, if you can get it back exactly as it was before. And if you want to open your eyes, nobody's put the hand up, which is quite amazing, isn't it? Yeah. And the great thing as well about this process, now we've set the brain in motion, it's kick-started that process off. So this will actually carry on for about 20 minutes or so. The brain will continue to process and consolidate and file those fragments away. So actually in 20 minutes time, and that'll be after we've finished, but in 20 minutes time, I want you to have a little go at try and get it back exactly as it was before, or just think about the memory again and see if it's faded even more and the feeling has faded even more. So these are the main things that we tend to see, the outcomes for IEMT. This is what you've just done basically. You've just done some smooth pursuits in these diagonals. Now these are very fixed eye movements that we have just done, but you've seen how successful just by very fixed directions we can actually get some change in the brain. Now with IEMT, with the training, what we're going to learn to do is to calibrate the eye movements, the little blips that happen unconsciously for people, so we can even speed this process up even quicker sometimes for people. And these are the 4 indicators of change. So this is what we're looking for to see that this is a good process for a particular person you're working with. So that the memory becomes less focused, blurry. So we had that. Somebody had it sort of gone blurry around the edges, didn't we? So the memory changes its quality in some way. The kinesthetic component reduces. So that feeling that was a 6 out of 10, for example. And obviously, if we're working with people with big issues, we're going to be working on 10 out of 10s for people. We're looking for a drop in the intensity of that kinesthetic feeling. Now, we had this distance. So I can't see your name because I haven't got my glasses on. Roger's wife, is it? Yeah, Jyoti? Yeah. So, yeah, Jyoti, you had this, didn't you? You had it moving backwards in the distance.
Yeah, it's for,
Yeah. So absolutely. So, you know, the image sort of seems to get smaller. So that's absolutely brilliant. And also people will report a kind of dissociation. So whereas before they were really sort of in that memory, they were feeling it in the body and they were seeing it through their eyes. For some people, it's almost like they've kind of taken a step back from it. And it's almost like they're kind of seeing someone else do that memory. So there can be this disassociation as well. Now, sometimes, like Jyoti, there can be a component going from colour to black and white. So we call this submodalities. So the submodality of a memory are sort of the different fragments of a memory, different qualities of a memory. So this could be the intensity of the colour, the intensity of the sound, could be how big the image is, it could be the kinesthetic, you know, how that felt. Was it warm? Was it cold? So that can change. The volume, as I say, of a memory can sometimes change for people. And I've worked on with this before. In fact, my husband's sitting here. He's actually worked on this on a piece of music that was troublesome and bothersome to him and made him feel very anxious. And so he actually worked on it with a piece of music. And that music no longer then elicited the anxiety. And it can go from a moving image to a still image. So some people say, oh yeah, it's more like a picture now rather than a movie. So that can happen. And there are other things that are reported, but these four, the memory change, the kinesthetic change, the distance, and this disassociation are the main four indicators that some significant neurological change has happened. So this is at the neurological level of the brain. So through the eyes, because the eyes move around, and have a little, in fact, you can have a go now. Have a little think about, because this is one of the things that is often not very well known, is that when we are thinking about stuff, creating memories, thinking about old memories, thinking of sounds, of music, of feelings, our eyes move. So have a little think about, say, what can we ask? The colour of your front door. So if you think of the colour of your front door, what's the colour of your front door? I just had to think, I just had to think twice then. What's the colour of my front door? Where do your eyes go to? Think about your favourite piece of music. So when you're in your mind, you're listening to your favourite piece of music, or think about the national anthem that's being played with the football, hasn't it? Think about the national anthem, perhaps. What do you notice? Where do the eyes go to when you're thinking about the national anthem? Brilliant. What about if you're just stepping into a lovely warm bath, lovely bubble bath or something, and just getting into a lovely warm bath, or putting a lovely warm robe on, or you're in front of a lovely fire? Where do the eyes go to? Or when you're thinking about somebody you really love, where do your eyes go to? So the eyes move depending on where we're either creating the memory or remembering something from the past. So this is why we use eye movements in order to release these memories, because because when that memory is created, the eyes were moving in specific ways. So the work that we do with the IEMT work, the practitioner work, as I say, we learn to become even more specific with people. So we can direct those eyes absolutely to the place that we need to be. Also, we can see little involuntary movements in the eyes when other memories pop in as well that might need to be dealt with. And we're working on those patterns of chronicity that are issues for people, and we're working on the identity stuff that people have as well. So, you know, we're working on a very holistic level with people to create change. We're not just going to make them feel a little bit better. You know, I'm a complementary therapist. I can pop someone on my massage bed, give them a lovely massage, and they'll feel better, won't they? They'll feel better, they'll feel nice. They'll go out the room. They might be floating on air after having some reflexology for an hour or two. But is that actually going to change an issue for them in their life? highly unlikely. So it's not just about making someone feel better, it's about fundamentally, you know, getting to the core and changing things from at this neurological level to help them actually be the people that they want to be, like the person that they are, and be able to function in the world the way they want to function and have skills in order to do it. Because what I do with my clients is I teach them this stuff. Why wouldn't I? You know, because
that's an interesting point. So the question
yeah,
is, how often should we practice those eye movements? And secondly, there's a number of individuals interested in finding out more about this and maybe becoming a trainer themselves.
Okay.
Maybe share that.
Yeah, of course. Well, you know, any little troublesome, bothersome memory you've got in your life, you can do this, can't you? So you don't have to practice. You know, once you know how to do it, you would only apply it as and when you would need to apply it. So it's very, very simple to do, as you've just seen. There are other techniques as well that people will want to learn and do. So these patterns of chronicity I keep talking about, people need to be aware of that and then understand how they need to change their language and their behaviours as well. But the eye movement stuff, you know, I'm having a lot of dental issues at the moment, and I've been getting trigeminal pain and getting referred pain in places I've never had pain before. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to do some eye movement work on this because I'm sure that I can get a shift. Now, I was having terrible pain right into the ear here. And instinctively, I don't know why, but instinctively I just decided that looping movements, up movements for this particular pain, I know now why it's worked actually, was going to be the right thing for me. And I'd been having, you know, a week of this pain. It had been awful. I thought, right, gonna give it a go. I did 3 passes. I did the eyes up, so these sort of looping movements like this. 3 passes backwards and forwards, and literally it was like somebody just switched that pain off for me. And I could feel, because we had this connection between eyes and ears as well, and I could feel the clicking going on. I can hear little bits of clicking going on as I was doing the eye movements, and it switched off that pain. So the great thing is that this can be done for emotional stuff and some physical stuff as well. So, you know, it really is amazing. So as far as the training is concerned, I've got a course in August, which is the practitioner level, call it level 1 practitioner level. That's coming up on 7th and 8th, 14th and 15th. So I've split it over 2 weekends. We're doing it via Zoom, so it's nice and easy. And there are different ways of doing this. So people might just want to dip the toe in and be using it for themselves, family, friends, don't really want to be a practitioner, don't really want to be doing it with clients and charging people, then you can do the training. You'll get 3 months access to all of the online resources, the videos, everything, you know, all of that. So you can do that, and that costs £265 if people want to do that. Those of you that want to be practitioners, there's an extra element. So you do the training, there's going to be a little bit of extra stuff. So I run a few practice sessions for you, but there's case studies to do, and I give you one-to-one mentoring. So we do, you know, you send in a bit of work, a bit of a case study, review it together on the video. I do a commentary of, you know, of what's happening in the video, what you've done, which is great, stuff you might have missed. Also, there's coursework to do, there's some self-use and self-reflection. So obviously that takes a little bit longer, and it's a lot of input from me because I'll be working with you one-to-one. So that is £395 for people, because, you know, there's that extra element, and the resources are open for a year then. So you get a full year's access to everything. There's videos of all the techniques, there's videos of trainings that we do, there's tons and tons and tons of resources and manual and presentation slides and all sorts on there that you get access to. And of course you've got access to me for your mentoring as well. So
Well, thank you for those details, and I'm sure people will be in touch if they want to take part in the training or become a trainer themselves. Is there any other questions for Sonia before we come to a close?
Your website.
Oh yeah, shall I visit my website, Raj? Would that help if I?
Share the website.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's Karis. Is any of this in any way affected by handedness? So, for example, quite a lot of the stuff around the brain that was talked about today,
No.
from my academic experience, comes from a lot of studies about right-handed people.
No, not at all. I think you're thinking of eye accessing work, which is the eye accessing stuff in NLP, and the pictures that you see in magazines and books tends to be for a right-handed person. But no, because we're working bilaterally, we're working on both sides of the brain, handedness makes no difference at all.
Oh, great.
Thank you. Brilliant. Okay.
Thank you. Any
Do you want to pop the slide up?
Share the website and say thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? So this is the training coming up. The website's very simple, integraleyemovement.com. So if you want to go there, I've also got a blog, so you're welcome to read, a lot of the stuff on the blog, and that's all free. I do some IEMT parties as well for people, and they're all free. I've got the Facebook group, so you're more than welcome to join that. And as I say, I've got the book coming out. There we go. Got the book coming out, coming out soon. There's never been an IEMT book written, so this is going to be the first ever book. So yeah. So thank you so much.
Whenever the book is available, I'm sure
I'll let you know.
Yes, and we really appreciate you taking the time.
You're more than welcome.
Share.
And I was going to say, Raj, if people want to contact you for my details, that's fine as well. So if you want to do the training or
also there will be a recording of the video.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'd like to maybe have you come back in a future date.
So, and do have another go at that eye movement with another bothersome memory and see what happens. Because you know how to do it now.
Okay, well, show appreciation, Sonia. Thank you very much. And
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.